Hello and welcome to a Xero how-to where today we're going to look at bank recs, which sounds like one of these categories where I actually think people think, okay, I'm comfortable with this one. But the reality is the bank rec is one of these notorious little areas where it's so easy to accidentally misallocate something or to run out of time and to know how to prioritize things. So we're going to look at when and why to reconcile and some of the various things which catch people out quite commonly. Some of them even catch me out. They catch all of us out at some point in time. It does happen. So I'm just going to share screens with you guys. And basically, I'm going to go into reconcile my account. So first thing is when and why to reconcile the bank. When, preferably as often as possible. What I would say is if you're doing credit control for a client, I'd recommend doing this as soon as possible on a Monday so that you've got this up to date. The more up to date the information is, the more valuable your information within Xero will be and the more informative it will be. You'll be able to carry out credit control, you'll be able to review your accounts. So I do sometimes see these spiral out of control. When they spiral out of control, you lose the quality of information. So we're moving on to the why, and we're looking at bank recs. So I mentioned credit control, mentioned bank management account information and stuff like that. But actually, there's more to it than that as well, because you can flag queries, you can flag disputes and fraudulent transactions. So there's really a lot more to it. Now, the first thing I notice when I'm reconciling a bank is obviously there's going to be items which look as though they're ready to be reconciled. So I'll see green transactions, and I'm drawing particular attention to green transactions because Xero is intelligent. It will pick up transactions which look like a match. I say look like because it's not 100% reliable and it's not 100% accurate. What it might do, for example, as Ridgeway University, it's actually got one other possible match found. So just be cautious. I wouldn't just run through and tick everything that's green. It is a temptation, I know, but when doing this, please do check the references actually match because it's really easy just to ping, 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 and then forget what's actually happened and know what's actually going on. So, like with Ridgeway University, I would just double check it is invoice 35, it is invoice 35. I'm happy with that. It is a correct green one. Now, what might happen is Xero might actually pick up an earlier invoice rather than the correct invoice reference, but like I said, has been getting very intelligent. So the question is, we've got all these green transactions. When is the time to place a green transaction? When's the time to create? When's the time to use find and match? So find and match is really handy on those ones where you don't have a clear match. As we all know, we can go to find and match, we can go to search, and we might sometimes return no result whatsoever. So with something like this, where Jacaranda, this is a customer receipt, it's a deposit. I might not have the invoice in the system. So what I would firstly do is check I've got the invoice. If not, I may still want this represented on my customer account. But what I would say with find and match is if we've got the accrual system where we've got invoices raised, please don't be tempted to post these as direct spends and direct receipts if they relate to customers. That one can catch people out very, very often. But we can, in fact, do new transactions, do new receive monies, and change items to overpayments, which will show them on their contact record. If it's a genuine payment of a deposit, the invoice hasn't yet raised, but we're holding the funds on account, and if something happens with the contracts, they may be entitled to reclaim some of the money back, if not all. So just to follow that through, when it decides to load, if I go to Jacaranda, I now have the fact that they have technically overpaid me £2,000, which will offset against an invoice when it is approved. So when do we use direct posting? Now, this is one of those ones where it can cause a bit of issues. Say if you can't find a transaction and you can't find an invoice, there will be some items which don't have invoices. There will be other items that should have an invoice. And when they should have an invoice, if we're using a system like Receipt Bank, Auto Entry, Hub Docs, etc., they might actually be processing the receipt. We might look here and go, right, Cooper Street Bakery, I've searched in find and match. I already cannot find the receipt. Therefore, I'll assume it's lost. I don't think I've got kitchen's expenses. I'm going to use the naughty general expenses code. Not recommending people use that, but just for the sake of the argument. So the temptation here is to do create. One thing to warn people of with the create transaction is, as you can see, Cooper Street Bakery And I've set this up, but the tax rate defaults to the default on the account code I am using. That one is a very naughty little feature. If I'm not paying attention, I can very, very easily post a transaction with VAT when I shouldn't be posting it with VAT. So please do take notice of that if ever creating a transaction. And one thing to say, if I do create this one, then it comes to a receipt bank, I'll end up with a duplicate. So what I'd need to do is then go back into the bank, remove it, and then reconcile to the bill. Otherwise, I've got a duplicate. So create transactions can sometimes cause a little bit of confusion. Then another one that causes a bit of confusion within the bank rec will be items. I don't know if I have an example in here, but I'm gonna let's use a little bit of imagination here, which makes a good example. Okay, let's say Whitcool's. Let's pretend they're a foreign supplier, and actually this is a US dollar invoice. Now, if I have multi-currency in Xero enabled, I can go find a match. I can search. And actually what you'll have is a little search bar here which says show GBP items only. If I deselect that, I can all of a sudden, I don't think there's any in this demo account, but I can all of a sudden search for different currency groupings. So I might be able to find US dollars, euros, etc. And then I could tick it and then it would say, here's your conversion rate, the amount looks right, you're ready to reconcile. If I don't have that functionality, all I need to do is go in, find the invoice, change the amount to the GBP amount which has left the account, and then just update that so I can find and match on that account. Now, another really useful feature in bank recs is the discuss tab. So these are for those little queries, and there's one up here which says this is for an old invoice, I wasn't sure where to code it. So discuss tabs are really, really handy. But the one thing I would say to make a discuss tab more helpful is to add initials and, if possible, the date of when the comment was left. So actually, if I'd written this comment, I might say I left this comment on 30th of the 10th 20XX, and then I've left my comment. Now, the reason that's handy is because if someone goes in and looks at it, say you've got a multi-user organization, you've got more than one people, you've got more staff members in here, you've maybe got someone you're communicating with who you're doing their bookkeeping for, you might actually find that if you use this sort of method, you might have someone respond. And it's important to know when they respond and who on earth has responded, because otherwise it looks as though they've just added it to your text string and it gets confusing to work out who said what. So someone might respond, and made a new month up a couple of days later and say, okay, found the invoice and I'm going to provide it. So it's helpful to know who said what, and preferably when they say it. You don't have to use the date. I recommend initials as a common routine just because it helps tidy things up and you can see what's going on, and then you can see the content chain. Very helpful. Another thing to note with queries is, depending on how your client works, depending on how you work as a business owner, it can be useful to show these in your P&L as a cost with no VAT element under a queries line. So I might actually add a new account. I haven't in here. I haven't got a queries account. Oh no, I do have it. Yeah. So I've made a queries account in my chart of accounts. I've set it to no VAT so I don't accidentally post something with VAT, which shouldn't have VAT. And I might actually put things in this queries account. So what happened is I'll just say query, who on earth is this? Or I might say which account code, things like that. And what this would mean is when I look in my P&L, I can see an account code line, which is queries. It has all of my queries in one. When I open it up into a bit more of a detailed review, I'll see line by line every single query. And it's often easier than working from the bank rec, especially if you have tens, hundreds of queries. It starts to get a little bit messy when they end up scattered all over the place. So that's quite a handy little tip. Now, one thing I will say with bank reconciliation is if you're restricted on time, say you only have about an hour and you've got many, many, many transactions to do, and you know you just won't get around to doing them all at this point in time, I would say there's things to prioritize without a shadow of a doubt. So what I would prioritize firstly, if you're on an invoicing / billing basis, prioritize customer receipts fact. It's one of those things which is the most important, because if you're going through your bank rec, literally scroll down the receive column, look at the received monies, allocate them to an invoice or at least the customer account as an overpayment, so that when you go to do credit control, that is one element that your client or yourself you can actually do, because then all of a sudden you can send out statements and their records are correct. So that's the vital one, that's the priority. The second priority after that would be supplier spends whereby they're an invoiced account. So Truxton property management, where they're sending me actual bills. So I prioritize this second, and I'd allocate these using the find and match functionality to make sure they're allocated against invoices. And then the lowest of the list would be items such as bank fees, etc. Although with bank fees, we'd probably set up bank rules in itself. I would just say these ones are lower priority. The values are smaller. They're not going to affect our supplier records and our customer records because they're just going to be there's no invoice, boom, it's straight to the cost in our P&L. There's no VAT on it to think about either. So these ones I would leave to the end. And of course, prioritize the high values as well, because obviously these ones are going to have more of an impact in the accounts. So worth prioritizing in your bank rec just in case you're running low on time. And then, as mentioned, then you can do your lovely credit control. And this is why bank reconciliations are so important, because without having those in place, you can't carry out credit control at all. And we do see accounts where there's, say, several hundred items which are awaiting reconciliation. Perhaps they've not got around to doing their bookkeeping, we're not engaged to do their bookkeeping for them. And all of a sudden, they can't do credit control. They don't know where they are. And then all of a sudden, they apply for investment. And all of a sudden, they're running around chasing their tails, trying to reconcile several hundred transactions at once. And the problem with that is it makes it more likely to incur errors. So just one thing to factor in there is the more regularly you do it, the easier it is. It's like cleaning your house. I don't like cleaning my house. No one likes cleaning their house. But actually, the annoying thing is if you do a little bit here and there, it's much easier than doing a 5-hour clean on a Sunday when you've forgotten to do it for however long. So bank recs are the same. They're like cleaning up your Xero account. So just one thing to factor in. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And if you do have any queries on bank recs in particular, please do let us know. Likewise, if you have any comments and if you enjoyed the video, please do let us know. We'd love to hear it. Thank you very much, guys. Take care. Bye.